Hi there. We're Modist Brewing, and we're extremely excited to be part of Beer Advocates Extreme Beer Fest.
Extreme!
We hail from Minnesota, and it's pretty extreme here. It's extremely cold,
Extreme!
extremely covered in lakes.
Extreme!
Hold on there, bud. It's actually 11,842 lakes.
Extreme!
Due to our extreme weather, we created the first ever fully enclosed shopping mall in 1956.
Extreme!
In 1992, the state went full send, opening up the extremely large Mall of America.
Extreme!
Modist makes its home in the center of Minnesota's largest city, Minneapolis. Built on the banks of America's longest river,
Extreme!
in the heart of America's grain belt, Minneapolis burst into the national spotlight in the mid-19th century thanks to one of the world's finest commodities, flour. Now nicknamed the Mill City, Minneapolis was the flour milling capital of the world for nearly half of a century. Side note, random fact, flour is more explosive than gunpowder, so sometimes the mills blew up. But that's okay, because we just turned them into museums.
Extreme!
Today, Minneapolis has continued its ascent to become America's 46th largest city, barely edging out Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Extreme!
Our residents spend their time doing things like biking in the winter, skiing without hills, or making our own ice ramps and jumps and skating down them, which is actually
Extreme!
Our city is also home to an extremely vibrant art scene, an extremely influential music scene, and thanks to our brewing predecessors, a badass craft beer scene.
Extreme!
Modist made its debut in 2016 with the aim to take beer where it's never been before, to create new beers and new beer experiences. And in order to pull this off, we invested in some rare pieces of equipment that do some extremely cool things.
Extreme!
This is our flavor overlord, Keegan, with our head brewer, Jack's arms. If you could hear what he's saying, you'd hear him explaining that this is our Mira mash filter. While it looks like a fancy new technology, they've actually been around since 1901, and more than 20% of the world's beer is brewed through one. He's also explaining that this device replaces the lauter tun of a traditional system. An easy way to highlight the difference is that a lauter tun works similarly to a drip coffee maker, using gravity to separate the liquids from solids, whereas our mash filter works similarly to a French press, using force to aid in the separation. Traditionally used by large breweries because of their efficiency,
Extreme!
Mira mash filters benefit those breweries with much higher yields,
Extreme!
lower hop consumption,
Extreme!
and much lower water usage.
Extreme!
However, recent adaptations of the system have made them available for craft breweries like us. And while we still get all of those efficient benefits,
Extreme!
we also get a benefit that helps us to innovate,
Extreme!
as the mash filter allows us to essentially make beer out of any grain in any percentage.
Extreme!
What now, gravity? Grains such as oats,
Extreme!
rye,
Extreme!
and wheat
Extreme!
tend to bog down gravity-based brewing systems, so they need to be used in limited quantities. However, the mash filter doesn't really give a shit, so you can essentially put whatever you want in it. So we try to do that. And because we have the mash filter, we also get to have one of these. It's a hammer mill. It also works differently than a traditional mill that you would find in a brewery. Where a traditional brewing mill takes a grain and cracks and grinds it down into a smaller form, a hammer mill pulverizes it into flour.
Extreme!
Brewing with flour helps us make all those extreme mash filter benefits work and helps us maximize the flavor that we get out of the grain.
Extreme!
We've put these things to the test over the years and put out some extreme beers, including a bunch of IPAs made entirely from oats and wheat,
Extreme!
an Imperial Stout made from over 60% rye,
Extreme!
Let's party.
and a 100% wheat single malt Pilsner.
Extreme.
We also made a new category of alcohol and called it brewed spirits, where we used the malt bill that is used in bourbon and made a 40 proof barrel-aged ale and served it as an old-fashioned.
Extreme.
Oh, and of course, we should probably mention the beer we brewed for this
Extreme.
beer fest. The beer in its original form started with a simple question. What other styles of beer can modern craft ruin? Lagers. Originally brewed under the moniker Nice Crispy Treats with our friends at Forager Brewery, we took a nice crispy lager that was perfect just the way it was and added marshmallows and vanilla. This marked the birth of a new style that hopefully won't catch on: pastry lagers. After a couple renditions of regular ass Mallow, we are now pleased to present to you Special Reserve Mallow, an imperial version of the original with double marshmallows and aged in our American oak foeders.
Extreme.
And just in case the beer wasn't extreme enough, we made a label that has a skull with a mallow in its mouth and diamonds oozing out of its skull holes.
Extreme.
We hope you enjoy it, and we really appreciate being part of this beer fest. Before you go, we can't talk about our city and our home without taking a moment to talk about the murder of George Floyd. On May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as he pleaded for his life. Fellow Minneapolis police officers Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Kung forcefully pushed down on his legs and back as Officer Tu Tao stood watch. The video of his murder sparked a breaking point for us as a community and shook the nation and the world. Excessive use of force and the extrajudicial execution of Black people at the hands of police is not unique to Minneapolis. We at Modist believe that creating and drinking beer is a community-driven act. As such, it is our responsibility to learn how to unlearn the systems of oppression that we live and act within. In order to be responsible stewards to our community, the leadership team at Modist is challenging ourselves and others to make ourselves vulnerable and work to rid ourselves and our communities of the stranglehold of white supremacy that contributes to the murder of our neighbors and Black, Indigenous, and people of color across the country. We believe that the future of craft beer depends on creating conversations for ourselves and for our communities to learn, grow, and create a new and more equitable landscape for all in craft beer and beyond. Black lives matter.